It's Thyra with Rent Mason Bees. I am at Pioneer Middle School in Shelton, Washington, and I came out earlier in the spring where we introduced and taught the kids all about mason bees and how they pollinate and how they're such amazing little pollinators for all of our food and everything we do. And I'm back out at the middle of June. They have a few more days left of school, and we're opening up the nesting blocks, and I'm showing the kids what they are discovering inside. This is RJ, one of the students. They have done studies. Will you tell us a little bit about some of the studies that you did this season with the mason bees?
So some of the studies we did were seeing what tubes mason bees liked, and we tested reed tubes, cardboard tubes, blue cardboard tubes, and paper tubes. And then once we were through with halfway through the experiments, we tested how the effects of rosemary affected if they wanted to go towards those nests.
And one of the tests that they were doing with rosemary was to see if Houdini fly larvae, which is a really bad predator to mason bees, were they attracted, did it deter them? And I think you did find out that the Houdini fly didn't really like rosemary, but they also found out that the mason bees didn't like rosemary very much either. So I want you to introduce this video. I just did a video yesterday. I wanted to prep it and get it ready for Mr. Smith's class here at Pioneer School. So you already saw it, but why don't you tee it up and introduce this video to the class and what we're going to see.
So in this video, we're going to see how pollen mites start out white, then not yellow, because younger pollen mites haven't eaten the pollen. And we're going to open up the nest, and we're going to see a whole bunch of pollen mites, and we're going to see a mason bee making a cocoon.
Yep. And we have taken little samples. They all have microscopes on their tables, and we're giving them samples of empty cocoons to look at. And we have a couple of little tiny baby larvae for them to look at under the microscope. There were a few cocoons that did not emerge, and so we snipped open the cocoons, opened them up, and inside were bees, so they're going to take a look at the bees. And then I've put a couple pieces of pollen loaf on the slides for them to look at, and they're finding pollen mites under the slides. So guys, we're going to show you this video, and we're going to start off the discoveries of what happens inside your nesting blocks. And they're mainly all in the larvae state, but some have started to spin the silk cocoons, so we'll show you all of that. And yeah, thank you so much. Hey everyone, it's Thyra with Rent Mason Bees. I came out today to check on my bee block and wanted to see what stage my bees were in so that I could teach all of you more about our bee stages of development. And I was really fascinated to find a couple of really cool things. I actually had to call our researcher Abigail from UC Davis and go, what the heck are these? So let me flip the switch over. I could only see these with my macro lens on my camera, and I couldn't see them with my eye. And so let me flip this around and show you what I just found. All right, so here is the nesting block that I very carefully opened for education purpose only. Please don't open your own nesting blocks because you need to send these kits and blocks back to us intact so that the little developing larvae can be safe and snug in there. But I found some really, really fun things. So I'll zoom in a little bit, but I just wanted to show you a wide shot of the nesting block. You can see that there's a bee right there in the larvae stage, just starting to spin its silk cocoon. Wait until you see that up close. That's pretty cool. And then next to that is another cocoon being developed, but it's a light color because it's just in the early stages of developing their cocoon. And then over here, you can see a whole cell of pollen mites inside. You can see the pollen loaf there, and all those yellow things are the pollen mites. And then you can see a couple of other cocoons and developing bee that are about ready to spin their silk cocoons. But let me switch this over to macro and show you what this little bee looks like under the microphone, who is just starting to build its silk cocoon. Oh, and wait until you see what these little pollen mites look like under the macro lens, and be warned, they're creepy crawly. Okay, hold on, let me switch over. Okay, let's start with our sweet little mason bee who is sitting in there spinning a silk cocoon. You can actually see it moving. Let me push this and see if I can go even closer in on it. Oh, look at that. Look how amazing that is. It looks like cotton candy, but that is actually its silk cocoon that it is building inside its nesting chamber. You can see the mud right there, and that little black stuff is just its mason bee feces. And then next to it is another cocoon that is still getting layers of silk. It'll spin a few more layers of silk, and then, as you know, when you get your cocoons, it's a darker color. So let's go back to this little bee before I terrorize you with the pollen mites. All right, you ready? Get ready. It's pretty gross. Here we go. Let's go up to the pollen mite cell. All right, everyone, I wanted to show you what I discovered today, and I needed to talk to Abigail from UC Davis, and I also reached out to Jacqueline from UC Riverside. We worked with UC Riverside last season when we sent them pollen mites and chalk brood for them to study and do research on. We did a whole video about what they discovered last year, and I'll post the link below because it's posted about a year ago. But it's pretty fascinating to see what they discovered in that research. But I asked them today, like, what are those white? I thought pollen mites were yellow. And Jacqueline said to me that those are baby pollen mites. Those are the larva pollen mites that haven't eaten the pollen yet and haven't turned yellow. So there are 3 stages of pollen mites that I learned, and she sent me slides to show me all 3 under a microscope. So there's the larva stage, which is what you're looking at right now, which they are just born and they are just crawling everywhere, and they're mainly centralized around that pollen loaf because they're sitting there eating the pollen loaf. As you can see, there's 2 mud caps there and the pollen loaf in the middle, but no evidence of a mason bee. That mason bee has been killed by these pollen mites. And so the 3 stages are the larva stage, and then the immature mite stage, which they start turning yellow, and then the adult phase. Now, all this yellow are adult pollen mites, Jacqueline said, and dead pollen mites. So some have already perished. So that's what we see when we open up the cells. If you rent from our program, we get to take care of all these little critters. We remove all the pollen mites from your nesting chambers and from your cocoons when we harvest and clean everything. And if you're cleaning your own, you have to make sure you're harvesting and cleaning your mason bees every fall, and you have to put out new nesting material in the spring. It's really important to provide clean nesting material every year. Bees, if you're raising solitary bees, there is maintenance and care to take care of them. As you can see, pollen mites will multiply rapidly, and what happens when you don't clean your nesting blocks, they will crawl through these pollen mites, and then the pollen mites will cling to the mason bee back. All right, you ready for something super cool? Jacqueline sent this to me, and with her permission, she is allowing us to share it with all of you. This is a microscopic picture of an adult pollen mite. Do you see the rectangle with the 4 dots at the very top of the picture? that is the suction and how it sticks and it clings to the mason bee. It locks itself on to the mason bee's back. And that is how pollen mites spread. So that little bee will carry the pollen mites out of this nesting chamber, and then it will spread it all around the flowers, and it will get on honeybees and other pollinators. So again, it's really important to harvest and clean all of your mason bee blocks, and then put out clean nesting material every spring. New nesting material has to be put out. Otherwise, you could still have remnants of chalk brood or pollen mites in there. So anyways, I just wanted to share this with all of you today. I found this fascinating. I didn't know pollen mites were white, but it turns out that those are the larva pollen mites that we're looking at. And yeah, I'm going to send some links below on Jacqueline's UC Riverside study last year. So if you're curious and fascinated by this stuff, please take a look at that video. I know we work with a lot of STEM schools and a lot of different programs that love to learn what we're studying, and so I thought I'd share this today. Feel free to share this with your classrooms as well. But anyways, I just found this fascinating, and always love to teach. Whenever I learn something new, I want to pass it on to you guys. So these are baby pollen mites. All right, everyone, it's kind of weird for me to say happy pollinating when we're looking at all these pollen mites, but happy pollinating. Have a wonderful summer. Take care. Bye-bye.